you. Thank you, Mark. I was actually on a flight when Mark reached out to me, and so it's kind of easy to respond when you're in the air. It's like my time to just take a breath and just be like, wow. Of course, I said yes. The reason that I was excited to come to speak to you is because you guys represent why I do what I do. The people in this room and your ideas are what we need to really change the world. We can't continue to run businesses, companies, and any institutions in the current status quo. That's just not going to help everyone. So I'm really excited to be here. I recently moved to Utah about 7 months ago, and the only problem was no one told me that I was going to have a runny nose and eyes watering the entire time that I lived here. So I don't know if you guys experienced any of that, and if you had any advice on how to deal with it, let me know. Otherwise, if you see me grabbing tissue and patting my eyes and nose, you'll know why. So today I'm going to talk to you about the Business for Good movement, where it's been and where it needs to go. But before I do that, I'm going to figure out how to use this clicker. Okay, but before I do that, I want to talk to you about my definition of what Business for Good means. Because currently there's a lot of words out there being thrown around. And I never used to understand them. Socially conscious, purpose-driven, mission-based, making an impact. I'm sure you guys have heard some of these words, right? So my definition of Business for Good is using business to create positive impact for the people, communities, and planet. Not a bad idea, right? Mm-hmm. But how did this Business for Good movement start? It really started a long time ago because we as human beings are all socially interactive, we're interdependent, we need each other to grow and thrive. And in order to do that, we have to have a system that empowers all of us, not just a few, right? So if you think about co-ops, they've been around for a long time. In the US, the Soviet Union, you can think about, like, I think the largest employee-owned businesses in Spain. And it's just really amazing what happens when everyone has a piece of that ownership and how they lift each other up. When you're in any kind of team, whether it's at work or in sports, if you interact and help each other, everyone wins. And that's what we're going for with the Business for Good movement. Now, how did this Business for Good movement look like when I sat in your seats 40 years ago? Any clues? Anybody? You can't speak because you know. It didn't exist. So, first of all, we did not have classes for entrepreneurship. There was no such thing. And I went to a big school, University of Minnesota, and quite similar to the size of this school, and it was like nothing to do with entrepreneurship. And we really never had anything that talked about using business as a force for good. The closest thing we had to that was this thing called corporate social responsibility. Does anyone know what that means? Tell me.
Well, it depends on what viewpoint you're looking at it from, but just taking care of your stakeholders and various people who are affected by your business and trying not to do harm.
Yes, that's great. And that's really truly how it started in the 70s. It was basically, hey, Corporation A, I'm making a lot of profits, so I want to help my community, so I'm going to set up a foundation, and then that foundation is going to empower people in my community. You're going to see our company logo everywhere, and it's going to be amazing. But it wasn't embedded in the business per se. It wasn't part of the everyday business model. It was just kind of like, we want to do good, and so this, and I'm not saying that it's a bad thing to have CSR, it's great, but it wasn't quite enough, and it was kind of like the beginning. And the closest thing that we ever had when, back then, well, this is a little bit longer ago, 1970, was the movement, the first Earth Day movement. And this embodied really, people were like, wow, we have to care about the environment. This is 50 years ago. Think about where we're at today. There's a little bit more awareness now. But between then and now, what's happened in the last 50 years, and in my case 40 years since I sat in your seats, 3 things have massively shifted. One is inequality. So never in the history of the US, not to mention the world, has there been such inequality since the Gilded Age in the late 1800s. The second thing that's massively happening is global trade. In the last 40 years, global trade, it's amazing. When you think about your smartphone, which I don't have on me, but let's talk about my watch. When you think about your watch, there's over, I think I read 200 companies involved in making the watch, and I think 40 some resources that are allocated from different parts of the world just to make those products. That's how intertwined our global economies are. And then the third thing that's happening is obviously the internet and information age. So we, at our fingertips, can get so much information quickly, a few clicks, and we can verify what's happening within a company or within a certain group of people and what those outcomes are. So we have all of this information. When I was your age, I was in the library. They didn't have the computers. They didn't have internet. It was like I'd have to go and research everything I wanted for many, many hours. I couldn't get those answers quickly. So now what's happened is, as a result of all of that, is we've had this massive kind of idea that there's something wrong in all of this massive global trade and all of this interdependency, and if one company or one country does something that affects another, it affects us all. So in about 2015, the UN did something pretty massive, because normally the UN has been very involved in political situations and sanctions, but now they stepped into the business world and they created the UN Sustainable Goals. And I'm gonna send some of these around so you guys can look at them, because what's great about this is that it provided a framework. For the first time ever, it provided a framework for businesses to say, hey, I want to be behind this, I want to be behind that sustainable goal. No hunger. General Mills has declared that they want to be aligned with no hunger, and they want to end hunger by 2030. So companies are really using this as a framework. They can use 1, 2, 3, 4 of them. It doesn't matter. But the great news about it is that there's something to look at and something to measure. We're in a world of data. People love to see the data. And so these types of systems are really enabling us to be able to say where we want to move, which direction we want to move. Because ultimately, the goal of Business for Good is, as Mark said, the collective well-being. If one group suffers, all groups suffer. So where are we now? We are being led by some of the most forward thinkers that I've ever met in my life. Some of them are part of the Bcorp movement. As you can see, I probably always wear my Bcorp button. Two of our companies are Bcorps. And what's amazing about the Bcorp movement is they started 13 years ago with 10 founding companies. One of the founding companies, of course, was Patagonia. And now they have over 12,000 companies, and in 67 countries. You don't think that's amazing? I think that's amazing. It really blows my mind. But also, what's important about the Bcorps is that they're growing at 3 times faster than other companies in their same industries. So if you're a Bcorp, yes, it's difficult. You have to go through a lot of evaluation and accreditation, and you have to have a lot of interviews, and they come to your office and make sure that you're doing what you say you're doing, and that you're treating your employees well, and that you're not hurting the environment, and that you're giving back and you're doing all of this impact that you say you're doing. So proud to be a Bcorp. It's also a lot of work, but I'd like to say worth it. Secondly, 1% from the planet, so that's really awesome. So a bunch of corporations said, hey, we're gonna donate 1% of our profits for environmental causes. So let's do that, that's great. And then obviously the sustainable brands are really pushing pushing the envelope. I got to go to my first Sustainable Brands event this June in Detroit, and what's really cool about that is they're creating a lot of metrics and data-driven tools for companies to show what their supply chain is like and how they're affecting their entire community. Then, my favorite part. This summer, in August, the Business Roundtable, composed of 180 corporations of the biggest companies in the US, signed the Business Roundtable document that said, really redefining the purpose of business. They said, we are accountable to all of our shareholders, not just our shareholders for profit, but we're accountable to everyone, our employees, our community, and our environment. Which is pretty astounding when you look at some of those companies that are up there. Take a look at them, and are you surprised by some of the companies that have declared the new definition of purpose? Me too. I'm really surprised by Coca-Cola, because last week, sorry, I try not to laugh about last week, but last week, so Coca-Cola's up there, they signed, right? They said, they made the statement, they were like, yes. And then last week, they made an announcement on social media that said, basically, we're really not gonna do anything about plastic bottles. Because, our consumers really want plastic bottles, but really it's, it would affect their bottom line. So, it's like, it's still good though that they signed that, because we're moving in the right direction. Did anyone else see that last week about Coke? Yeah. So we're moving in the right direction, and it's really an exciting time, specifically to be an entrepreneur, because you get to define the rules. You get to define what business is going to look like, and you get to define how it's going to affect the community and the world. But there's still work that needs to be done. This image is of a young person in the Democratic Republic of Congo. And so imagine this person, he's maybe like young, I don't know his exact age, let's say he's 12. He has to go into these mines with tools that are not very advanced, and he has to procure this resource that we all need in order to make all of our technology. And so he has to get this stuff that's called coltan. And what's really hard about it is, like, I almost broke down in tears last night. I was thinking about how to share the story with you. But it's like they're forcing children to do this, and they're forcing them, with guns, and they pay them $1 to $2 a day, and they work 12 hours. I can't say anything more about it, other than the social cost, the social value is really a problem that we all need to be thinking about when we're creating businesses. So how do we solve for that? And how do we take all of those factors into account? That's what I call siloed thinking too. It's like we have to think about the entire process and how it affects our communities. When you hear the word local, that's a really cool word. And it really impacted me as I was thinking about talking to you guys today. It impacted me in a way that was super positive, because I thought about the dry cleaners that I recently went to, and it was in American Fork, and I met the owner because I was saying, hey, can you please clean my jacket because it's really cold and I need it a couple days, not a week later. And so the owner came to meet me, and he was the same owner. His family had owned this dry cleaning place for like 80 years, and 2 of the employees had been there from, way back before he was there. And this was the son of the previous owner. So those types of businesses are what keep us growing and keep us, the community, connected and feeling really, really together versus this very distant type of allocation. So then, we always have to be aware of something that I like to call, this example is really a tough one because it's cognitive dissonance. And cognitive dissonance just basically makes you forget what your belief systems are and allows you, it's a psychology term, but then allows you to be, okay, I'm gonna forget that for a little while because I'm gonna do this. Amazon is the best example of that. So what they do is they have this program called Amazon Smile, and you can click a box when you're shopping, and then he's smiling because he knows. And you can click a box when you're shopping, and half of 1% of whatever the value of your goods are that you're buying can go to that charity. So that's cool, right? It makes you feel good, a little bit less guilty about your purchasing, but not really when you think about it. So what we're doing today is really not going to cut it. And the reason is we have 4 fundamental things that are happening that are transforming in a very negative way what's going on. The first thing is we have resource overshoot. In this graph, you can see that in 2019, I guess that goes up to 2018. In 2019, same thing. We have used 1.7 Earth resources. We only have 1 Earth. So what are we going to do? We have to consider how we're going to do regenerative things for the environment and the soil. Second thing is obviously environmental destruction, floods, all the stuff that's happening. You guys have seen it, I don't have to tell you. And then we have inequality. Remember when I told you that we have the largest inequality since the Gilded Age? Right now, I was shocked to really understand that over 50% of the people in the US cannot afford a $500 emergency. You know that too? Man, you know everything. So, like, star student here. What happens massive inequality? Obviously, Mark, for those of us who studied history, social collapse. I am going to do a little aside that we are a little bit unusual in Utah. So for those of you who have not lived in other parts of the country, this is a pretty special place because I love living here. It's amazing, and people are just, they lead with love, and it's a very different culture. But that's not always the case. So it's really great when you get to go out to other places and see how the rest of the world lives. So where we're going, we're doing good. Like companies for the first time, businesses for the first time have power. And this power is being driven, a lot of this is changing because of people like you guys. Consumers are saying, hey, we want you to stand for our values. And we're going to buy from companies that represent our values. Quite honestly, consumers say that companies that are purpose-driven, they'll represent 90% of the companies they want to buy from versus not. So that's a pretty big deal. And the fact that Bcorp have grown at 3x the times the rest of the companies tells you something additional. So we're doing really well, but it's almost like we have to go a little bit backwards in time to that thinking of collective well-being. Sure, it's really easy. I'm not gonna lie. It's really easy, and I have a lot of customers because I also have an ad tech platform. A lot of customers that fall into this mold. It's really easy to make a paraben-free, gluten-free, vegan-free, plastic-free, you name it, skincare product. But do we really need a 506th skincare product? Or should we be thinking about how we can make some changes in the infrastructure of systems around the country and the world? That's what I would ask you. If you do decide to do that, call me up. I'll be happy to run ads on my ad tech platform for you. Not a problem. And now we get to go to my favorite part. I get to show you some of the coolest companies that are actually thinking about all of these things and really making a difference. So this company, Sistema Bio, this awesome entrepreneur, again, really great person. They started in Tanzania, and they said, hey, there's a problem. And the problem is we need, lots of things to fuel our houses, our small farms, and we also need fertilizer. So they developed this biodigester which takes manure from animals, and it processes it, and then you can have heat for your house. It reduces deforestation, and also you can have biogas to run your energy systems for your farms, and then of course biofertilizer. Bye-bye, Roundup. This company, M-Pesa, so cool. Who would have thought in 2005, this entrepreneurs decided they saw a problem really, and the problem was there was millions of unbanked people. So what do you think that means? They have no banking accounts. So how could they conduct business? They were conducting business in cash. And what's the problem with cash? Yep, pretty ineffective and dangerous. And specifically if you're already living in a dangerous place. So they introduced with the simple technology of integrating SMS with smartphones in order for people to conduct economic transactions. One of the most magnificent outcomes of this was a surprising outcome, and it was that women in the family were then able to be in charge of their own finances, and the outcomes of that were that they were able to provide more goods for their family and education for their kids. It was so cool. And obviously they're still going strong. And then we enter into the shared access economy model. Personally, I think you guys know a lot about Airbnb, so I'm not going to go too much into what Airbnb does and when they started. You guys are really, really smart. So what I'd like to say though about Airbnb is that was a crazy idea 15 years ago. So when I heard about Airbnb, I said, no way. And then I was like, oh, I don't want people going in my house and touching my stuff, and that's weird. I'm here to tell you, I'm an Airbnb superhost. I am, and I'm pretty proud of it. I have like all-star ratings. I'm really good about responding too. The other company that I want to tell you about is Parachute. It's a Utah-based company. I'm sure you guys, a lot of you have heard of it. I hope you've heard of it. Have you? No. Has anyone heard of it? A few of you. Okay, well, these guys are amazing because what they did is they said, hey, why should anybody pay for all of this high-tech equipment and have it as a privately owned property when there's already so much of that out in the marketplace? And then they asked themselves, well, is it possible? Would it be possible to take those things like that camera over there that's used maybe 5% of the year and then recirculate that for people whenever they want to use it? And then we don't have to produce more cameras. Brilliant idea. And obviously they're extending to other markets as well. If you don't know the founders, good friends of mine, I would be happy to introduce you. So as we go into the future, what I want you guys to think about is it's one of my favorite psychology concepts, and it's Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I'm sure a lot of you have heard of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? A lot of hands, yes, yes. It's pretty simple in the way it's structured. You have to have, the basic things, breathing, food, water, to be able to then move up to security, love, belonging, esteem, self-actualization. And I am hoping that you guys are all going to be people that get up to self-actualization, because that's where all the creativity is done. That's where all of our ideas, when you feel secure and you have a home, you can pay for your rent, you have medical insurance, you have food, you have love, you have connections, your social groups, then you can really think about, hey, how are we going to address all of this stuff that's happening and make something really magnificent happen? My challenge to you is, when you go out and you start thinking about either the companies you're going to start or the companies you're going to work for or the companies you're going to work alongside with, let's think about it from the business of good hierarchy of needs. Let's start with, does it address fundamental needs? Does it provide food? Like I met an entrepreneur who's developed a technology, so when a restaurant closes down, there's a certain amount of time they have to deliver food to the homeless. How cool is that? And they're integrating like Uber and Lyft and other stuff to deliver the food. That's just awesome, fundamental need. Does it create shared value? So as in the Airbnb example, think about all the people that get jobs when other people stay in their places. In my personal example, I know that people who cook get jobs, people who do travel get jobs, people who do, events get jobs, and that makes me feel happy. And all of these people that are staying in my space, they're like elated because they're learning a new culture. Does it create community and connectedness? It's kind of like that thing that we just saw about M-Pesa, which is really amazing. It creates a different community that didn't exist before. And then the last one is, does it transform current business truths? Think about Parachute. What did they say? Parachute said, do we all have to privately own everything? That's what it was like when I grew up. Everyone privately owned everything. So do we have to do that? They said no. So we're creating a logistics company that does away with that concept. So my challenge to you all is be the leaders of the future and not the followers of the present. The present is good, but the future is even more brilliant when we all work together to really think about the collective well-being. I want to leave you with a conversation that I had with another fellow Bcorp friend the other day, and we were talking about the different challenges because doing business in and of itself is hard enough, and doing business and then taking all of these things into consideration is obviously harder. But he said to me, hey, Elizabeth, we're really lucky. We're born into a time where we have so much possibility, and any of us can do anything we want, and we can help each other grow. And we should think of it as a blessing. Sure, there's challenges, but we should look at this as a blessing and really think about the opportunities that we have to impact the world in a very positive way. So thank you so much. So now, Mark, if we can.
And did you want to have
Yeah.
While they're coming up, can you tell a little bit more about what a B Corp is? What makes a B Corp different than a C Corp and A Corp?
Yeah, so a benefit corporation, it's like this bottle says. It's like by buying and working for alongside B Corps, you're gonna vote for what you believe in. It's aligning your values with what your mission and vision is. So B corporations have a whole set of parameters. In order to become a B Corp, you just have to focus on what are your values. And then you have to make sure that you meet those values. It's a lengthy process, and anyone that wants to learn more about the B Corp movement, obviously some great examples other than myself that are B Corps here in Utah are Cotopaxi, great company, yeah, awesome. So these are the kind of companies, Ben & Jerry's, Patagonia's, Tom Shoes, Warby Parker's, and they're just growing exponentially. So I would love to do an entire session just on B Corp because it merits it.
Okay.
So now I'd like to introduce, so not often do you get to have the great privilege of working with two of your kids. And I get to introduce two of my kids, and they both work with me at JUCO and Global Gaming Initiative. And really, what can I say? It's an extreme honor to introduce them, Alejandro Fenn and Tess Fenn. So I thought it would be fun at this point to really open up questions, and you guys can ask anyone the question.
I'll bring the mic.
And yes, offer you a mic, sure. Alejandro will pass out the mic. So ask anybody you want, any question that you have. Yes.
Alright, so with the sustainability, I get, you want to help improve, the world, but how, as far as starting out, make it profitable? Like, I want to make shirts I want to find it the cheapest, so I'll go to China. Maybe not the best factory, maybe not the best salary for the workers, but I'll be able to sell it and compete with prices like Walmart or Target. You know, how do you do that?
Yeah, so, would you like to answer that, Alejandro, or I'll give a small example, so like, man, I can go to Alibaba, honestly. I can buy whatever I want. I'm really good at branding, marketing. I can, sell yoga mats, for example. I love yoga. I can sell them and they could be sustainable and all this stuff. But then you have to ask yourself who's making them. So I get what you're asking. The first piece is you do have to make money. So you have to figure that out, and you have to figure out when you're making the money, when you're producing a good, like a CPG, you do have to understand if your values matter so much to you that you want to be in alignment with them. And not just price. So price is a complicated thing. I think Alejandro would love to talk to you about price.
Yeah, I mean, your question's really poignant because, like, from the economic standpoint, of course, kind of like Elizabeth alluded to, that whole concept of like social value and cost, that's not included in price, right? Like the well-being of the workers or the effect on the environment of that activity or the benefit of that activity for the surrounding community, it's not included in price right now. So that's why obviously $5 shirt made by like a child slave in Bangladesh is $5, right? And a locally hemp grown shirt that's gonna last 10x as long as $30, right? So us as entrepreneurs, and like we're in the ad tech space, so we see a lot of these companies that are exactly struggling with this aspect. This is an ongoing barrier. It's not gonna go away anytime soon because it's bigger than any of us, it's bigger than any economy. It's really at the market level. So it's like an awareness really. How can we change the rules of the game, because no single institution can do it. And I would just add the main, really when you know like, all right, we're gonna have slimmer margins, we're gonna have higher costs because we wanna do X, Y, Z in terms of our impact and like that whole creating shared value. Well, we've gotta have really good marketing. We've gotta have really good brand positioning, really authentic stories. Being in ad tech, that's what sets all the people that have great intentions and have the right business model from the ones that do and don't succeed. The ones that do have really good storytelling, really good content, really good brand positioning. They're able to get a lot more customers at scale. Obviously, then as they grow, they'll be able to procure their goods for a lower cost. So, no easy answer, but really, really good question. I think it hits the nail on the head. A fundamental issue that we will all face as social entrepreneurs.
Thanks for that awesome question. Yeah, gotta make money first. Who else? Yes.
It's a little bit off topic, but you kind of mentioned Alibaba, and like when I thought of that, I thought of Amazon FBA. Do you think that, have you guys done anything with Amazon FBA, or more of a question?
Not us personally,
No.
but can you explain to everyone what FBA is in terms of fulfillment?
So FBA is fulfillment by Amazon, and so technically what you do is you can buy stuff from either eBay or Alibaba and ship it to either your house or ship it straight to an Amazon facility where they then go and ship it. Because the majority of Amazon is bought by third parties. So that's just people like us who just have an account, and that's a way of doing the business and making an impact.
Yeah, so what's your question?
I was more wondering if like your business has anything, like does anything with Amazon or in that way.
Yeah, so we don't in that regard, and even the fulfillment, like when you think about the creating shared value kind of concept, in many ways it adds a lot of value, right? Because it's like people like you, people like me, we can do a business buying existing goods and putting our own brand, selling it, and all of that. So really as that kind of business for good framework that Elizabeth laid out, think about that in the context of any existing business model like a FBA type thing, because there's good and bad.
Yeah, and I mean, there's a lot of efficiencies that I know I have a lot of friends that actually do business that way, and it's very successful. And so, good, so that's already existing, and we don't need to create another logistical system like that. Smart to use that, yes, and what else, right? It allows that space for you to then think, what else can I do? Great question. Who else? I love questions, come on. Yes?
So, I'll just speak loud. Where do you feel like you're getting the most of your creativity? As you're generating these new ideas and you're trying to vet them out, what does the process look like as you're vetting an idea out, and where do you generate the idea from?
Ooh, so where you generate the idea from, that part I'll answer first, and then the process is so long, I'll let maybe someone else answer. So how you generate the idea is, you just, whether you're a person that enjoys maybe dancing, as Mark said, he thought I was in dancing, okay? So dancing or nature really, for me, has been instrumental. I've always been a very out-of-the-box thinker, and it's when you go to that place of really saying, hey, I can empathize with this situation. So like when I started my mobile game company, it was about, people thought it was crazy because it was like, how are you gonna connect games with impact? There wasn't such a thing, but I knew that it could happen. And it's about really getting to a place where you can see that there's a need. Like in the examples that I showed you up there, like that Mesa was another example. They saw there's a need. So for me personally, I just tend to look at the world to a collective lens, not through just my personal lens, because I have been able to get to a few of the levels of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, so I'm fortunate that I can get to that higher level to then really serve, but serving in a way that's more inclusive and more sustainable and really just massive. In terms of how you go about validating that, it's very hard. There's millions of times that I failed. I can't tell you the number of times, and I'd be happy to tell you about them if anyone wants to know. But it's very hard, and you have to surround yourself with a lot of really good mentors, and you have to go to experts every time you have a question. Don't hold back, right? Because there's always going to be people that have been there before, done it before, and don't be afraid. Would you like to say anything?
Thanks, Elizabeth. I'll just add on to your question. I've been fortunate to study entrepreneurship throughout my formal education, both in my undergrad and grad school. I went to grad school at NYU, and I had an amazing professor in design and innovation. And he gave me an example that I always think about, which is, think about anywhere that duct tape is used. It's essentially trying to create a new product or improve on a design that's malfunctioning. And then I had another good friend say, just keep a list of all the things you want to punch, all the things that are frustrating as you go about your life in the world. Whether it's through an improvement in design, whether it's an improvement in connectivity and efficiency, maybe an improvement on a business that already exists, but doing it in a way that's more thoughtful to the community, to the environment. It's never, I think that there is a structured way to go about coming up with entrepreneurship ideas, but sometimes I find that they come in unexpected times, like Elizabeth was saying while she was dancing or hiking. So I would recommend keeping a journal where you write down a lot of ideas, because you actually don't really know which one is going to stick and which one's going to be a motivator. In terms of deciding whether or not you want to move forward with an idea, there's this concept called an MVP, a minimum viable product. So essentially what you want to do first is do your research and understand the landscape of this concept. Okay, looking at Honest Company as an example. This is a brand that started out with diapers and baby care products. And yeah, there were other diaper companies, there were other baby care product companies, but they realized that mothers really valued, families really valued, knowing that the products that they were using weren't harmful to their children or to their families. So they created a trusted brand, and they used, as Elizabeth said, and Alejandro said, really powerful storytelling to differentiate themselves in a market that already existed, and really created a household name with Honest Company. So that's an example of a business that really wasn't creating something new, but was differentiating themselves. I think that you can create something like a minimum viable product. In that case, let's say a set of diapers that were more sustainable, and test it out in a small micro environment. See how people respond to the product.
One more thing to add. This tidbit goes more in that middle stage where you're like, all right, I've refined like what I think is maybe the best idea or the top 2 ideas. All right, now I'm gonna go out and get validation, validate my hypothesis, either yes, it makes sense, or no. All right, I'll move on. Talk to as many potential customers as possible. Like call them, Facebook them, LinkedIn them, just be on their case. And like you're selling, but you're just basically selling in the sense of like, hey, I've got this idea, it's what I'm trying to do, this is my vision, what do you think? And then you're basically getting that firsthand data from like 100, 200, 300, however many touch points you can. Obviously the better, the more the better. And then you've got the right data, you've got the right understanding of if there's a product market fit. And if there is, when you come back, when you have your product, your kind of like company goods or services ready, you've already got 500 perfectly waiting potential customers just waiting to become your early adopters. So if you take that strategy, you'll be able to A, make sure you've got the right idea and that it's been validated, and B, you've got early adopters kind of at your fingertips.
Fantastic. You get 3 for the price of 1. This is great. As you can see, what I love about this is that here they are kind of, we didn't talk much about what JUCO does, but it's really a marketing,
Ad tech.
and ad tech based businesses, and you're designed to help these companies find a way to be successful in some areas that are a little bit more challenging. So love what they're doing. It's fabulous to have them here. Any final thoughts you'd like to say, and we'll wrap it up.
My final thoughts are that you inspire me. I think I said that at the beginning of the talk today, but really truly, as when Mark reached out to me, you guys, anything you need, any questions you have, all 3 of us are here to help you.